So, yeah, thank you so much. So, yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for everyone that made that possible. Let's talk today about something great. So, I'm here to talk to you about something that you all love. You're all here for this. It's Angular. So before going into the main topic of my talk, I wanted to present you, give you a quick look at what we are shipping next week, and it's going to be Angular version 21. So recently, I was a bit bored. I went on Reddit and I asked some people, yeah, what's the least favorite API you had on Angular? And I think you have a good idea of what the top answer was. Forms. And especially? Control value accessor. Exactly, #1 answer. So yeah, this is something we knew for a bit of time, that our forms were not ideal. So we've spent the last several months rewriting them. And it starts with the new signal forms. We're going to ship them as experimental in V21 starting next week. When I say experimental, it means that it's still very much a work in progress. And Eliran will give you a short presentation just after my talk. Second, we'll introduce a new package called Angular Aria. Angular Aria is a library of headless components and directives. By headless, I mean it's components that will have a functional behavior, like matching autocomplete, some toolbar, things like this, but without any stylings. So you can finally have some components that just work and bring your own stylings without having to tweak the Angular materials style components. And of course, with this, we're going to bring additionally the accessibility that you didn't have with the bases that you had on the CDK. And on release day, we're going to have a set of 9 different components and directives, and later on, we'll add some more to that list. Then next, V21 will finally bring zoneless by default, meaning that you won't need to add the new provide zoneless change detection in your applications, but will still support fully the Zone.js-based application, as we believe that they will be here for a long time, so not everybody is expected to migrate to zoneless. So you will still have to add a new provider. This will be automatically added to your applications when you do ng update. Also, who loves testing here? You, yeah. I know it's a topic. We have to do it. We sometimes don't like it too much. About testing, you've heard probably that in V20 we introduced an experimental support for VTest, the new testing and test runner and testing library. And with the V21, we're going to make it stable and also the default for any new project. So meaning that starting for V21, we recommend using VTest instead of Karma and Jasmine. This is only talking about the official support by the Angular CLI. You can have also other supports by other builders, of course. And last but not least, for the V21, we'll introduce some new tools to the MCP. So the MCP is a model context protocol, which will allow you, your favorite AI engine, to talk to, let's say, the Angular CLI to provide some more context and improve the output of your favorite AI agent. If you want some more details, you can get already today to the next talks, next.angular.dev/AI/MCP. You will have the list of all the tools that are provided with the new MCP, and that will help you develop with AI. So this is a short introduction of the V21. It's expected to be released next week, very probably on Wednesday. So, that being said, I wanted you to have a better vision of what we do when we are building Angular at Google. Give you some insights of how it works for us and how it will somehow impact you on your side. So the more you know, building Angular. I was shortly introduced. I'm Matthieu Riegler. I'm a French software engineer. I live in the Alps. I'm often known to post some social media pictures where I'm coding somewhere in the train in Europe, going somewhere. I love to travel. I'm part of the Angular team and work for Google as a contractor. You can find me on the different social networks, and also I have a personal blog where I post some technical insight, let's say. So, oh, just noticed something, I have no connection. Yes. Better. So yeah, the Angular team is made, as you might know, of real people. We've got the front-end team, the framework team that's mostly developed what you know as the different packages that you have, the router, common, core, platform browser, things like this. We got people working as DevRel. We got people working on the toolings. When I mean tooling is like the Angular CLI, the MCP. And we have got people working on the components team, which are providing you Angular material, Angular ARIA, Angular CDK, and all the libraries like maps and things like this. So the team is made of real people, but also Angular is built by you. You, the community, as open source contributors, people that open PRs, people that open issues, people that help us understand what they need, what they want, and people that use Angular, of course. You might know that Angular lives into our heart. But, I mean, let's not kid. It lives on GitHub. As you might know, we have a GitHub repo. It is public. It's open source. You can fork it, look at the code, test it, things like this. So this is where we work every day. Like most of you do, you use Git, open PRs, commit on this, and we ship the code directly onto GitHub. But in the context of Google, Angular is a framework that is maintained by people that work full-time at Google. And at Google, we have something that we call Google 3. Google 3 is a monorepo. So saying that all the code, a lot of the code, is inside a single code base. And it's gigantic. You have over 2 billion lines of codes. There are more, let's say there's more than half of the applications at Google are hosted in that monorepo. You got things like Google Search, YouTube, G Suite, the Cloud Console from GCP, Google Photo, things like this. Examples that are not in the monorepo are Android that has its own Git repo, Google Chrome, and things like TensorFlow. So besides that, everything is in that monorepo. And this includes over 4,000 Angular apps, meaning that we work in a context where Angular at Google is used by 4,000 different apps. So just to give you a bit of insights, that tooling is totally custom. It's not based on things like you might be using like an X. It uses a different code version tool, which is called Piper. So there is no Git, no SVN, things like this. It's a very complex one. And there is no branches. It is trunk-based. So there's one single version that is shared with, of the code that is shared with everyone. There is a build tooling called Blaze. Externally, it's also called as Bazel, which is open source, which helps us build, test, and compute all the dependencies between projects, between libraries. And since this is a monorepo that is way too big to host inside your own machine, you have a custom IDE, which is called Cider. It's basically a VS Code that runs into your browser that allows you to access any file of code that you would want when you're developing. So as you can see, really different setup that any of you would likely use at work. So what's the impact when we develop Angular on this? So Angular also lives into Google 3, into G3. It means that the code that we write directly into GitHub when we merge the PRs will need to be synced regularly. When I say regularly, it's several times a day, will need to be synced from GitHub into Google 3. And when we do this, you will see that I said there is no branch. We do not use NPM versions that we ship. We have something that is based on the head of the monorepo, which means that there are no versions. So if ever you're curious and you want to check the version that is deployed of any of the Angular apps at Google, you check the DOM with the debugger, and you look for that ng version here. And you will see that ng version is not the major you used to see, like v19 something, v20 something. You will see a 000 dash placeholder, meaning it was built from the monorepo at the time at the head, so using the latest version. So it means that all the code that is shipped is actually built on the latest version. So it means it's shipped and tested often even before you can even use it, even before we release the code on NPM. That example that I'm showing you here is from Google Fonts, which is an Angular app. Next, so the implications when you do this is that since it's a monorepo, if we merge something that breaks some other app, we need to fix it. We at the Angular team are responsible for breaking any apps when we update the framework. So even before it reaches a version that we publish on NPM, we have feedback that some code might be breaking, and we have to take care of it. So meaning that because we can have some insights of what's breaking and what's not, we are able to leverage the monorepo by testing the PR, the changes we want to integrate against Google's apps. So we are able to see. You might see if you check the PRs that we open, you often see comments from the team that we need a pre-submit or what we call a TGP. Those are the words we use when we want to test a change against the monorepo. A pre-submit is like when I take a subset of applications and we're able to test it in a few minutes if our change in Angular is breaking those subset. And if ever a change is more risky, we want to say, OK, we'd like to test it against all the 4,000 apps. And this is when we run a so-called TGP. We say, OK, that change is risky, we want to test it, and give us the insight if that change breaks something or not. And if it passes, I mean, it passes compilation times, compilation checks, unit tests, screenshot tests, and also some end-to-end tests, meaning that we are able to test in a few hours if a single change breaks any of all the apps. That means that we are able, even before we ship it to you, to test the whole framework. About the breakages, so often we see that it seems to be easy to do, we do get feedback if we merge something that we only tested partially. Let's say we only tested on the third part, and we get feedback that we have a breakage in less than a couple of hours. So in less than a couple of hours, we get feedback from other teams say, hey, you broke us, please fix it first. And usually it means that we need to revert our change, and then we'll have to investigate what we broke and send another change in later so we can let's say, we don't break other applications. About breaking changes, you will notice that sometimes it looks easy to do some it looks apparently easy to do some breaking changes. I mean, some changes look easy to do, but are very breaking. I took an example on a PR I tried to do when I started to do some open source contribution. There is an issue that asks for changing the types of query list changes. Basically, we return today observable any, and we wanted to return observable of t, with t with being the generic type of query list. Looks easy to do. It's a 2-line change. And you're like, okay, I can do it. I can open a PR. The problem is this kind of change is actually breaking. And sometimes it's not worth it for us to land a breaking change because we mean that we need to migrate our own code base at Google, meaning that we need to migrate the 4,000 applications. Sometimes, if it's really worth it, we write a migration that you have also when you do ng updates. But sometimes we think that it's not worth it to spend time to migrate all the 4,000 apps. So what we do in those cases is that we say, oh, we don't want to do it. And we sometimes comes up with a better alternative. In that case, it was when we introduced the single queries, and you could just have the better API, the better DX, developer experience, by just using the new API. So in that case, single queries were a better alternative, and we accepted that the API of query list wasn't ideal, but we have better alternatives today. So when we talk about building a framework, we talk about building features. That's what really matters to you. Do you have an idea? So, yeah, how old Angular actually is? The other day, I spent some time digging on GitHub when the oldest commit was, the first commit of the repo was written. It was done by Miško Hevri, who was the creator of Angular, and it was on September 18th, 2014. So it means over 11 years ago today. So we are using a framework, the code base. You have some code that is over 10 years old today. Means how often do you work on such old code bases? My guess is very few of you have such old code base. How do we age a code base very well? How can a project live more than a couple of years and age well without becoming a messy project that nobody wants to work on? Well, one of the key ideas is that you need a long-term vision for your project. Key ideas that will lead you forward, direction you want to go, and you know that this direction will take you several years to go. And for that, we have like a very large backlog of ideas that we classified in terms of priority, of course. And it's mostly made of 3 things. Ideas from the team, ideas that we have that where we want to go. Request ideas that come from inside Google. So we have teams that ask us, yeah, we would need this for our product, that would be interesting. But also, and this is one of the important things for us, is the famous, what I would call the famous GitHub issues. So whenever you go on GitHub, so often you see that we have some emojis on the top, on the top of the feature request saying, yeah, we want this, you add a thumbs up. It's really important to us, so it helps us classify what you believe is something that framework should add. So building a backlog, but you're part of building a backlog by giving us feedback of what you think we would want, you would want. So if ever you want to see something happen, try by adding a thumbs up and giving some more thoughts and feedback on the feature requests. Also, we believe that we should go towards some directions. So some big ideas, often that's not a single feature, but it's something that we want to go in the future. So when we choose to deny some improvements or to go for some improvements, they often follow main directions. Like, we believe that our template syntax should not diverge too much from JavaScript. If ever we want to support the entire scope of JavaScript TypeScript supports, we shouldn't add syntax that isn't something that the TypeScript JavaScript syntax supports. Also, example, when we do some improvements, we're like, we should go toward a goal of what we call single file compilation. So in terms of compilation in JavaScript, TypeScript, you often need to read other files to understand how you compile the current file. This happens, for example, with components. This is why we have today double imports. Imports of the TypeScript symbol and imports of the directive or the component. This is because today we have, for example, selectors on your directives and your components. And when you compile, you need to actually check the other file, verifying that what the selector is and to match it directly to the template. So ideas like you might have heard it, like selectorless. This is a topic where we would drop the selector in your components and just use a class name, a bit like how TSX would work, JSX would work. The idea is that we think that this is the kind of goal that would bring us closer to a single file compilation. That would be the features that we would want to implement, and some others that would introduce, that would bring us back further away from single file compilation. Those are the features that we know today we won't go and we won't do. So the basic idea is that there are main goals we want to reach, and those goals help us decide if some feature will happen or won't happen. I'll continue about long-term goals of the project. We do have a lot of internal documentation, and I think that's something that you should also aim to write when you have long-term projects in the companies you're working for. We have some called the decision records, as when we are designing some new features, we want to track a bit first what we call the product requirement document, the PRD, which described the feature in a broader sense. That's, let's say, an idea we want to ship. It describes the feature before we implement it. It's like the idea we had initially when writing it. Then we write some design docs. The design docs is where we write more technical details, some of the challenges we encounter, some alternative we'll be thinking about, some of the things around the feature. And this is what's often challenged by the whole team, saying, okay, this or that should be changed, maybe let's discuss that other point. It's something that's very changing when you write the feature, when you experiment with it. And once everything has settled, everyone has agreed that that's exactly what we want, we take a step back, and a bit later we have a document that's like an architectural decision record as to keep a track of the decision we made and to have a look later on when some decisions were made. So for example, in my case, I joined the team a bit more than 2 years ago, and I was really interested to see why some decisions were made in the past, having access to some of the documents, seeing, okay, these are the reasons we went for this and not for that, is really interesting to understand the context you are working in. So having documents for your teams that are accessible, that help you understand the context on what you're working, are very important to help you age a project well, and whenever you have some turnover in your teams, it helps you give more context. Also, what's very important is the way you comment your own code base. I've noticed that very good comments help a lot navigating some code you don't have all the context. So for example, imagine you're working around an issue, we're working around a bug. You won't just say, okay, I'm working around something, or not even leaving any comments. If you can add context to the code that doesn't explicit it, so the code cannot explain why you're doing this, if you comment correctly, like imagine you say, okay, I'm working around this bug, you're mentioning the GitHub issues that link to it, it will help people understand, even people that are outside the team, understand why we're doing such behavior in that particular case. Last but not least, what I think is also very important is a very well, I don't know how to say that, but a very clean commit tree. Like, when I started using Git, I didn't care about rebase, merge, cherry picks, fix up, things like this. But when you have a code base that's over 10 years old, it's really important to be able to go up the tree and navigate and see where changes happen, why they happen, in which context, etc. Having a good cleanup commit tree where you smash all the changes into one, saying, okay, that feature is a single commit, so you have more visibility on how big the change was for such feature. So try as an exercise to work on your commit tree and clean up things. These are the keys that I believe will help you work on and age your code base well. About the feature request I was talking to you about, where you can give us some more feedback. Like I said, it is very important to us that you give us feedback on what you need, what we want. One of the problem I could see in the team is that we are building a framework more than building applications. So you are more using the framework than we do ourselves. Of course, we get some feedback from inside Google, but we also need your feedback and your inputs. And when I do some caretaking on our issues, so because our project is open source, we get a lot of inputs. And if you want to say, okay, I would need that feature, what would make it a good feature request is tell us your story. Tell us why you want something. Give us your use case. Explain us, hey, for example, what I'm doing today, either it feels like very nasty code, or it doesn't even work, or I need to use some private API. I'm not really happy with what I have. Tell us what you have. And share with us a repo. Give us an example. Help us also understand what you tried, what you might fail to do, and give us more insight. So if you give us this, it will help us understand, and maybe it will help us help you going toward your own goals. All of this led us, so you might know that we've been using that term for a couple of years now. We're talking about the Angular Renaissance. So Angular has changed a lot since V14. It started when we introduced standalone component, then we introduced new reactivity, then we improved the SSR story, things like this. And we noticed that new patterns take time to settle. We like to take a step back and not to rush into feature requests. So, okay, we understand that you might want new features, but for us, it's important to not rush things, and we take a lot of time to listen to all the cases. And the best example I want to give is how we evolved our reactivity primitives. So initially, when we introduced signals, we only had 2 signals. And I mean, we got the signal, got the computed, and then the effect. Okay, it gave us the basic primitives. Then we got more and more feedback telling us, okay, we'd want to have some kind of writable computed. This is where we introduced after several months the link signal. Later on, we noticed that people were using a lot effect to do, let's say, more imperative code instead of having something that's more declarative. We've been saying a lot that effect is something you should be using very carefully. Because overusing it will often lead you to some declarative code, some imperative code that is less readable, less maintainable, and we were pushing for the message. And something that we actually learned from the React community is that use effect was usually a bad pattern because it wasn't expressing what you really want to do. So this is how it led us to introduce a new pattern that we call the resource. Resource is basically an async derivation. So when you would have before a synchronous derivation with link signals or the computed, with the resource you have an asynchronous derivation. So you could declare async dependency into your code. And this only happens after we got in the feedback and we're starting seeing some usages from you. So I give you a rough idea. It's only 20 minutes of how Angular itself is built. If ever you want to see all the latest updates, check V21 starting next week. I'll be around the whole day answering all the questions. Please come up to me. I'd like to chat with every one of you. Every single one of you. I can stay a bit longer if necessary. Thank you so much for being such an awesome community. Yeah, thank you so much.